I was lying in a hospital bed with tubes in my arms when my mother leaned close to my ear and whispered something I will never, not in 1,000 years, forget. She said, "We told them not to fight too hard for you." I thought I had misheard her. I hadn't. There was a DNR form on my chart, a do not resuscitate order, signed, filed. My family had put it there without my knowledge, without my consent. I was 31 years old. I was alive. And the people who were supposed to love me most had already decided, quietly, calmly, like it was a business decision, that maybe I wasn't worth saving. But here's the part that will shake you. My sister found out what they did, and what she said next, those 3 sentences she spoke in that hospital hallway didn't just save my life, they burned the whole family lie to the ground. If you have ever been made to feel like a burden by the people who were supposed to protect you, stay with me. This story is for you. Welcome to Soulful Drama Stories. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell right now because we tell stories that reach into your chest and rearrange something every single time. My name is Naomi Voss. I am 33 years old. I live in Denver, Colorado, in a 2-bedroom apartment I share with a golden doodle named Fig and about 4,000 books. I'm a high school English teacher. I love my students like they're partly mine. I coach the debate team on Thursday afternoons. I make a banana bread that my colleague Marcus says could end wars. I am, by any reasonable measure, a person worth knowing. It took me a very long time to believe that. Because I grew up in a house where worth was assigned, distributed, handed out like an allowance, more to some, almost nothing to others. My mother, Diane Voss, is a woman who manages everything and everyone with a kind of surgical precision that people on the outside mistake for strength. She's organized, she's composed, she volunteers at church, she brings casseroles to sick neighbors. She is, by all public appearances, an excellent woman. But behind the casseroles, there is a ledger, a running, invisible tally of who is an asset and who is a liability, who makes her look good and who complicates the picture. My older sister, Bridget, is always an asset. I have always been the complication. Bridget is 4 years older than me. She's beautiful in the way that makes people comfortable, symmetrical, polished, the kind of pretty that doesn't threaten anyone. She married a man named Warren Cole, who is a hospital administrator. They have a house in a suburb of Portland that has a mudroom and a wine rack and a finished basement. My mother talks about that mudroom like it's a personality trait. I never had a mudroom. What I had was a studio apartment until I was 28, 3 part-time jobs while I finished my teaching credential, and a recurring conversation with my mother in which she gently, consistently, with great warmth, suggested that maybe teaching wasn't practical. Maybe I should think about something with more stability, something like what Bridget had. Bridget had a husband who made 6 figures. My mother never said that out loud. She didn't have to. I didn't know it then, but the way she looked at me in those conversations was the same way she'd look at me in that hospital room, like the math didn't add up, like I was a cost she hadn't budgeted for. I want to tell you something about what it's like to grow up as the second daughter in a house like mine, because I think a lot of you already know this feeling, and I need you to know that what happened to me is not something you imagined. When you are the child who is loved less, you don't always know it right away. You know something is off. You feel the temperature difference, the way the room gets a little warmer when the other one walks in, the way your mother's laugh is slightly more generous, slightly more real when she's laughing at something your sister said. You tell yourself you're imagining it. You adjust. You try harder. You get good grades. You bring home art projects. You sit up straight. You stop crying when things hurt because crying makes her tired. And slowly, so slowly you don't notice it happening, you start to believe the story they're telling about you, that you're difficult, that you need too much, that you're the one who makes things complicated. By the time I was 15, I had internalized a version of myself that was basically an apology walking around in a human body. I'm sorry for taking up space. I'm sorry for wanting things. I'm sorry for existing in a way that requires attention. I carried that into college, into my 20s, into relationships that confirmed it, men who treated me like an inconvenience because I had practiced being one for so long. I carried it into the night everything fell apart. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you're connecting with this story, drop a comment below. Tell me, were you the overlooked one? I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now. We have a community here that sees you. When I was 29, I was diagnosed with a heart condition, not a dramatic life is over diagnosis, a manageable one, a structural irregularity that required monitoring and eventually a minor corrective procedure. My cardiologist, Dr. Yuen, was calm and specific and reassuring. She said people live long, full lives with this. She said the procedure was routine. She said I had nothing to panic about. I told my mother. The phone call lasted 6 minutes. She asked if it was serious. I said it was manageable. She said that was good. Then she asked if I had thought about whether my health insurance through the school district was adequate, because Bridget's husband, Warren, had excellent coverage through his hospital system. That was the call. 6 minutes. No, I'm coming out there. No, what do you need? No, I love you, sweetheart. Let's figure this out together. Just, is your insurance adequate? By the way, Warren has good insurance. I called my friend Priya afterward and cried in her kitchen for 40 minutes. She held my hand and said, Naomi, your mother is not going to be who you need her to be, but I am here and I am going to drive you to every single appointment if that's what it takes. Priya drove me to 7 appointments over the next year. My mother came to 0. I should have seen what was coming. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. But when you love someone, even someone who keeps proving they don't love you back, you keep making excuses for them. That is the tax of being the overlooked daughter. You pay it for years, and then they hand you a bill you never saw coming. I scheduled the procedure for March, the corrective surgery, technically an ablation, nothing requiring general anesthesia, low risk, outpatient in most cases. Dr. Yuen said I'd likely go home the same day. I called my mother. I told her the date. She said she and her father had already planned a trip to Portland that weekend. Bridget's daughter Lily had a dance recital. I said, Mom, I'm having heart surgery. She said, you just told me it's a simple procedure. I said, it's still a procedure on my heart. She said, Bridget needs us there. Lily has been working on this recital for months. Lily was 6 years old. I was 31 with a heart condition, going into surgery, and my parents chose the recital. I told myself it was fine, that Priya would be there, that Dr. Yuen was excellent, and the procedure was genuinely low risk, and I didn't need my mother holding my hand. I told myself that. I believed approximately 40% of it. The procedure did not go as planned. That happens sometimes. Not often, but sometimes the heart surprises you. Midway through the ablation, my blood pressure dropped. Then it dropped again. There was bleeding they hadn't anticipated. My heart went into an irregular rhythm that needed immediate intervention. What was supposed to be a 2-hour outpatient procedure became an emergency. I was unconscious for most of it. I didn't know what was happening. But here's what I found out later. What my family did during those hours, I still have trouble saying it out loud. Priya was in the waiting room. She had been there since 7 in the morning. She was the only person there for me. When the procedure ran long, when the nurses came out and said there had been a complication and they needed to reach my emergency contact, Priya called my mother immediately. My mother answered. Priya told her there had been an unexpected complication. Naomi was in the OR. The doctors needed guidance about care decisions. My mother said, "How serious?" Priya said, "They're not sure yet. They need family here, or at minimum, they need to speak with someone who can make decisions." My mother said, "We're in Portland. We can't get a flight until morning." Priya said, "Can you talk to the doctors by phone? They need someone to—" My mother said, "What kind of decisions?" Priya told her the truth. She told her that in the event things escalated significantly, the hospital needed to know the patient's wishes, that they had asked about advance directives, that I didn't have one on file. There was a pause. My mother said, "I'll call the hospital directly." She called the hospital, and here's what she told them. She told the attending physician that her daughter had spoken to her about this, that her daughter had said, and I need you to really hear this, that her daughter had said she would not want extraordinary measures, that in the event of significant cardiac failure, she would not want aggressive resuscitation. She told the hospital I had said this. I had never said this, not to her, not to anyone, not ever. My mother told a doctor that I had expressed a wish not to be resuscitated, and the hospital, following what they believed was a family member's account of my previously stated wishes, put a DNR notation on my chart. I was unconscious, on a table. My mother was in Portland watching my niece's dance recital, and she had just told the hospital not to fight too hard for me. Stay right here, because what happened next, what Priya did, and what my sister did is the part of this story that gives me chills even now. Don't go anywhere. Priya did not go home. Priya sat in that waiting room for 11 hours. She drank bad coffee. She answered emails. She called my mother back twice and got voicemail both times. And when the attending physician came out to speak with family, Priya stood up. She said, I'm here for Naomi Voss. The doctor explained the situation, the DNR notation on the chart, the source, a family member's account of the patient's wishes. Priya looked at the doctor. She said, Who told you that? The doctor said, We spoke with her mother. Priya said, Her mother is not in this state. She has never discussed this with Naomi. I have been Naomi's closest friend for 11 years. She has never, not once, expressed any such wish, not to me, not to anyone. The doctor said they needed to follow protocol. Priya said, Your protocol is based on a lie. She was calm. Priya is always calm. But underneath the calm was a fury so concentrated it could have cut glass. She said, I need to speak with your patient advocate right now. She spent the next 2 hours in conversations with the patient advocate, the charge nurse, and eventually a hospital administrator. She said, The person who gave you that information was not in this building, was not in this state, has not spoken to the patient about this, and I am formally contesting the validity of that DNR on the grounds that it was not the patient's expressed wish. It was the assumption of a family member who is not present. The hospital administrator made calls. The DNR was flagged as contested, pending verification. My surgical team was instructed to treat me aggressively. They did. I woke up 14 hours after going under. Priya was sitting in the chair next to my bed. I said, through the oxygen mask in the foggiest voice of my life, How long have you been here? She said, Long enough. She didn't tell me everything right away. She let me stabilize, let me sleep, let me come back to myself slowly. It was the next morning when I was sitting up, drinking water, feeling the peculiar wonder of being alive when you weren't sure you would be, that she told me. She told me everything about the call to my mother, about the DNR, about what my mother had said to the doctor. I listened. I didn't say anything for a long time. Then my mother walked into the room. She'd flown in that morning. She and my father came in together. My father hung back near the door the way he always did. My mother came straight to the bed. She looked me over, tubes, monitors, oxygen, and she said, You look better than I expected. I said nothing. She said, The doctors said it went well in the end. Dr. Yuen is very capable. I said, Mom. She said, I said, Did you tell the hospital I had a DNR? A pause. Not a guilty pause, a calculating one. I know the difference. I have been watching my mother calculate my entire life. She said, We discussed end-of-life preferences last Thanksgiving. I said, We did not. She said, Naomi, you were very distressed about Grandma's passing, and you said, I said, Mom, stop. My voice came out flat and certain, and completely unlike how I'd ever spoken to her before. Something about 14 hours on a surgical table rearranges the part of you that softens yourself for people who don't deserve it. I said, I have never told you or anyone that I wouldn't want to be resuscitated. You told the hospital something that wasn't true. And if Priya hadn't been here, if she hadn't contested it, I don't know what would have happened on that table." My mother's face did something complicated. She said, "I was making decisions in a very difficult moment. I was trying to honor what I believed you would want." I said, "You were in Portland at a dance recital." She said, "Warren's family needed—" I said, "I needed you." The room went very quiet. My father was still by the door. He had not moved. His hands were in his pockets. My mother said, "You're being dramatic." And that's when the door opened. I had no idea my sister was in that building. I had no idea what Bridget had done at 4 o'clock in the morning while I was still on the table. And when she walked through that door, nothing in this story was ever the same again. Bridget had found out at 2 a.m. Priya, exhausted, furious, and out of options, had texted Bridget from the waiting room. She sent 3 words: "Naomi needs you." Then she sent the details. Bridget told me later that she sat on the edge of her bed and read Priya's messages 3 times. She woke Warren. She said, "Something has happened to Naomi, something bad, and Mom is at the center of it." Warren booked her a 5 a.m. flight. She landed in Denver at 7:15. She was at the hospital by 8. She had not called my mother to tell her she was coming. When she walked into my room that morning, past my mother, past my silent father, straight to my bed, she grabbed my hand and held it with both of hers. She looked at me, and she didn't say anything for a moment. Then she looked at our mother, and she said 3 sentences. 3 sentences that I have replayed in my memory every single day since. She said, "I know what you told the hospital. I know you were not in this building. And I need you to understand that I am done pretending that the way you treat Naomi is something I don't see." My mother opened her mouth. Bridget said, "I'm not finished." She turned back to me. She said, "Naomi, I should have said this years ago. I'm sorry. You are the most real person in this family, and I have let them make you feel like the least important one. That ends today." The room was completely silent. My mother said, "Bridget." My father said, "Diane." Bridget said, "No, both of you, listen to me. She was on a table with a contested DNR that Mom put there, and I was asleep in Portland. That is not okay. That is not what a family does. That is not what mothers do." She was not yelling. That's the thing I need you to understand. Bridget was quiet. She was steady. She was the calmest person in that room, which meant every single word landed like a stone dropped from a great height. My mother said, "You don't understand the pressure." Bridget said, "I understand exactly what happened. Priya told me. Mom, you told a doctor that Naomi had expressed a wish not to be saved. You said that while she was in surgery, while she was completely alone here." My father made a sound, something that wasn't quite a word. Bridget looked at him. She said, "And you flew here this morning because you had to, not because you needed to. There is a difference, and you both know it." She turned back to me. She said, "What do you need right now? Right this second? What do you need?" I said, "I need everyone except you and Priya to leave the room." Bridget looked at my mother. She said, "You heard her." My parents left the room. I know. Take a breath with me, because the story doesn't end here. What came next is the part where everything my mother built, every story she told about me, about our family, about what kind of daughter I was, started to collapse. Keep watching. And if this story is hitting you somewhere real, please hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it means everything to this channel. I spent 6 days in the hospital. Bridget stayed for 4 of them. She slept in the recliner chair they dragged in from the family lounge. She brought me real food from a Thai place 2 blocks away because hospital food is a form of punishment. She sat with me while I cried, and I cried a lot in those 6 days. The messy, undignified kind that cleans something out of you. We talked more honestly in those 4 days than we had in our entire lives. She told me things I hadn't known, that she had watched my mother dismiss me at family dinners and felt sick and said nothing, that she had watched my mother redirect conversations away from me for years and told herself it wasn't that bad, it was just their dynamic, it wasn't her place. She said, I kept thinking, if I say something, it'll make it worse for you. I convinced myself that staying quiet was protecting you. I said, it wasn't. She said, I know that now. I said, the looking away is its own thing, Bridget. She held eye contact. She said, I know, and I'm not going to do it anymore. My mother called the hospital room twice while Bridget was there. Bridget answered both times. Both conversations were short. I don't know exactly what was said, but after the second one, Bridget sat back down next to me and said, she wants to apologize, but she wants to do it in a way that makes you responsible for accepting it immediately. I told her that's not how it works. I said, what did she say to that? She said, she was taking your side. I said, are you? Bridget said, I'm taking the truth's side, and right now, the truth lives over here. On day 4, after Bridget left, I was alone in that hospital room for the first time. Really alone. Priya had gone to work, the nurses came and went in their efficient rhythms, the TV was on with the volume low. Outside the window was a February sky, white and still and very high. I laid there and I thought about my mother's face when I asked her about the DNR. The calculation, the way she'd framed it as honoring my wishes. She had not been there for my diagnosis. She had not been there for my appointments. She had not been there when I needed her at 31, the same way I'd needed her at 11. But she had been there, on the phone from Portland, when someone needed to make a decision about my life. And she made the wrong one. Not by accident, by habit. I was an inconvenience she had been quietly managing for 31 years. On that table, she had managed me toward the exit. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, and then something happened in me, something quiet, something that didn't announce itself. I stopped being afraid of her, just like that, like a light going off. Not because of anger, anger had been there for years and it hadn't done this, because of clarity, the complete, unambiguous clarity of a person who has seen something undeniable and cannot unsee it. My mother had put a DNR on my chart, and for the first time in my life, I was not going to explain that away, minimize it, or forgive it before she'd earned it. I picked up my phone. I called a woman I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. Her name was Dr. Camille O'Coffer. She was a therapist. She had been my therapist for 2 years in my late 20s, and I had stopped going because I convinced myself I was fine. I'd done enough work, I didn't need it anymore. She answered on the third ring. I said, hi, I don't know if you have an opening, but something happened and I think I need to come back. She said, when can you come in? That phone call was the turning point. Not a dramatic one, not a cinematic moment with swelling music, just a woman in a hospital bed, deciding, for the first time in her life, to put herself first. Not out of selfishness, out of survival, out of the bone-deep understanding that no one else was going to do it for her. I was discharged on a Thursday. Priya picked me up. She had Fig in the back seat, my dog, who erupted when he saw me in the hospital parking lot. We drove back to my apartment. She had stocked my fridge. She stayed 2 hours and then left me to rest. I sat on my couch with Fig on my lap, and I opened my phone. I started to write. Not a revenge plan, not a scheme, something much simpler and much more devastating. The truth. I wrote it all down. Everything. Starting from the phone call I'd made to my mother after my diagnosis, the 6-minute conversation, the parents who chose a dance recital over a surgical procedure, the DNR, what Priya had heard, what the hospital administrator had documented. I wrote it in clear, direct language. No dramatic flourishes, no embellishment, just what happened, in order, with dates. Then I wrote something else, a letter to my sister Bridget. I thanked her for coming. I told her what those 4 days had meant to me. I told her the truth about the things I had felt and not said for years, not to hurt her, but because she deserved honesty after choosing honesty herself. I sent the letter. She called me within the hour. She was crying before she finished saying my name. We talked for 2 hours. At the end of the call, she said, I want to do something. I want people to know what happened. Not for revenge, because I think this happens in families more than anyone says out loud. And I want other women to know they're not alone. I said, what are you thinking? She said, I know a journalist. I didn't know it then, but that sentence was the beginning of the end of the story my mother had been telling about our family for 30 years. The journalist's name was Teresa Wynn. She wrote for a women's health and wellness publication, a real one, not a tabloid. Long-form, researched, careful. She had covered medical ethics, patient rights, family dynamics in healthcare settings. Bridget had interviewed with her once for a different story, years ago. They had stayed in touch. Bridget reached out and said, I have something. It involves our family. It involves a hospital DNR and a mother's phone call, and I think it matters beyond just us. Teresa said, tell me everything. I spoke with Teresa twice before I agreed to participate. I wasn't interested in a hit piece. I wasn't interested in exposing my mother for sport. What I told Teresa was this: I want people to understand that what happened to me, the pattern of being dismissed, minimized, made to feel like a burden, is something many women carry, and I want them to know that it can escalate, quietly, incrementally, until the person who was supposed to love you is making medical decisions that erase you. Teresa understood completely. She spent 6 weeks on the piece. She spoke to Priya. She reviewed the hospital documentation. She interviewed a patient rights attorney and a family therapist. She reached out to my mother for comment. My mother did not respond to the first 2 emails. On the third one, she called me. My mother called on a Sunday afternoon. I was grading papers. Fig was asleep on the rug. Outside, Denver was doing the thing it does in early spring where the sun comes out and everything is briefly perfect. I let it ring once, twice. I answered. She said, a journalist called me. I said, I know. She said, Naomi, you cannot do this. I said, I'm not doing anything to you, Mom. I'm telling the truth about what happened to me. She said, this will destroy our family. I said, our family was already in trouble. I was on a table with a DNR I didn't consent to. That happened first. She said, I made a mistake. Those 4 words, the closest she had ever come. I said, what kind of mistake? She said, I was frightened. I didn't know what to do. I panicked and I said something I shouldn't have said. I said, you told a doctor I wouldn't want to be saved while you were at a dance recital? She said, you don't understand how it was for me in that moment. I said, help me understand. And here is where something surprising happened, something I hadn't planned for. My mother started to cry. Not performed crying, the real kind, the ugly kind, the kind that sounds like something being pulled out of you. She said, I have always been so afraid of losing you. I said nothing. She said, you have always been the one I didn't know how to hold. You were so much yourself, so much more than I knew what to do with, and I kept getting it wrong. I kept trying to make you smaller because the size of you scared me, because I didn't understand how to love something I couldn't contain. I sat very still. She said, that night, when Priya called, I heard the word surgery, and something in me went very cold. And I made the worst decision of my life from that cold place. And I have not known how to say this to you. I said, you're saying it now. She said, Yes. The silence between us was different from any silence we'd ever had. Not cold, not strategic, just open. I said, Mom, that's not enough. It can't fix what you did. An explanation isn't the same as an apology. She said, I know. I said, but it's the first real thing you've said to me in 30 years, so I'm gonna hold on to it. She made a sound, half sob, half something else. I said, the article is going to publish. I'm not pulling it to protect you from the consequences of what happened, but I want you to know I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm trying to be real for the first time in my life, and you're gonna have to decide if you can handle a daughter who is real. She said, I want to try. I said, then start. Hold on, because the article published, and what happened next, the response, the wave, the moment it reached people who needed it, is the part that still takes my breath away. The piece published on a Tuesday. It ran under the headline, When Family Becomes the Risk, one woman's story of a DNR she never approved. Within 6 hours, it had been shared 80,000 times. Within 24 hours, 400,000. The comment section was something I had to stop reading and start having Priya summarize for me because there were too many, and they hit hard. Women writing, my family made a medical decision for me when I was hospitalized last year. I thought I was imagining things. Women writing, I am the second daughter. I have been the second daughter for 40 years. I cried reading this on my lunch break, and I don't know what to do with that. Women writing, the part about being made to feel like a burden, I felt that in my whole body. A patient rights organization reached out and asked if I would speak on a panel about family medical decision-making and informed consent. A therapist who specializes in family systems posted a video response that got 500,000 views in 3 days. 2 television producers emailed Teresa. My mother's name was not in the article. My sister's name was not in the article. No names were used except mine with my full permission. But my mother knew. She called Bridget. She said, people are talking about it at church. Bridget said, I know. She said, what do I do? Bridget said, the same thing Naomi did. Tell the truth. Start with yourself. My father called me on Thursday. He is a quiet man. He has spent my entire life being quiet in rooms where he should have spoken. He called and he said, I want to come to Denver, not with your mother, by myself. I want to sit with you and I want you to tell me what these years have been like. Not from my perspective, from yours. And I'm not going to defend anything. I'm just going to listen. I held the phone for a long moment. I said, okay, Dad. He came the following weekend. We sat at my kitchen table for 3 hours. I talked, he listened, exactly like he'd promised. He didn't defend, he didn't redirect, he didn't say, your mother has a point. He said, I failed you by being quiet. I have no excuse for that. It was easier to stay out of it, and I chose easy over right. I'm going to have to live with that. He cried once, near the end, the way men cry when they've held something too long. I cried too. It wasn't fixed. Nothing was fixed in 3 hours. That's not how it works. But it was real, and real was more than I had ever gotten from him. I'll take real. It is 2 years later. I am 33. I am healthy. Dr. Yoon confirmed a successful recovery, full cardiac function, no complications. I run 3 mornings a week. I eat well. I sleep 8 hours. I have a life that is fully, unapologetically mine. My debate team went to the state championship this year. We didn't win, we came second. My kids were devastated for about 40 minutes, and then we went out to pizza, and someone started an argument about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. And I watched them debate with actual rhetorical structure. And I thought, I love this job. I am exactly where I should be. Bridget and I talk every week. Real conversations. We have developed something we never had before, a friendship. Not just a sisterhood, an actual friendship between 2 women who choose each other. She told me recently, Warren asked me what changed between us. I told him I stopped looking away. She is teaching her daughter, Lily, who is 8 now, and electric and absolutely everything, that you say the hard thing when the hard thing needs to be said, even when it's scary, especially then. Priya is Lily's godmother. Bridget asked her at Christmas. Priya cried in a way that made everyone else cry immediately. My mother and I have a relationship. I need you to understand what that means and what it doesn't. It doesn't mean she became a different person overnight. It doesn't mean the 30 years of patterns vanished. It doesn't mean we still don't have difficult conversations, still have moments where I feel the old reflex, the apology-shaped version of myself trying to smooth things over. What it means is that the relationship is honest now. She came to Denver in October, first time she'd ever come to visit me on her own, without a family event, without a reason other than me. She stayed 3 days. She met Fig. Fig is aggressively friendly and immediately decided she was his person, which she found both startling and deeply flattering. She sat in my classroom one afternoon. I had a prep period. The room was empty, and she looked around at the student artwork on the walls, the books piled on every surface, the debate brackets I'd drawn in marker on the whiteboard. She said, "You really are something in this room." She said it quietly, almost to herself. I said, "Yeah, Mom, I am." She didn't apologize in those words, not directly. I don't know if she ever will. Some people are not built for the direct apology. It requires a kind of self-confrontation they can't access. But she looks at me differently now, like she's trying to catch up to who I actually am, like she's seeing something she missed and is furious at herself for having missed it. I'll take it. I am not waiting for her to finish becoming who I need her to be. I am living my life. She is welcome to walk alongside it if she chooses. That is the only offer I have left. Here is the real story underneath this story. It's not about a DNR, though that's how it came to a head. It's not about a hospital or a surgery or a journalist or a viral article. It's about what happens when you spend so long being the overlooked daughter that you start to believe you deserve to be overlooked. It's about what happens when that belief gets tested by something undeniable. My mother put a DNR on my chart. That is the most literal version of what she had been doing my entire life, deciding, quietly and from a distance, how much fight I was worth. The answer she had always given was not much. The answer I gave from that hospital bed, calling Camille, writing the letter to Bridget, speaking to Teresa, refusing to retract the truth to spare my mother's comfort, was different. The answer I gave was, I am worth everything I have. That is the truth that set me free. Not the article, not the sisterhood with Bridget, not even my father coming to sit with me in my kitchen. The moment I decided I was worth fighting for, the same way Priya had fought for me, the same way Bridget had fought for me, was the moment everything changed. You cannot wait for your family to decide you matter. You have to decide first. You have to be your own Priya in the waiting room, contesting the narrative, refusing the version of events that erases you. And when you do, when you hold that line, something remarkable happens. The people who were capable of seeing you will step forward. They were always there. They were just waiting for you to believe you were worth stepping forward for. I believed it, finally, at 31 years old in a hospital bed in Denver, Colorado. It was about 20 years overdue, but it was right on time. To every woman watching this who has ever been the overlooked one, the second daughter, the complicated one, the person at the table whose voice gets redirected, I see you. You are not a burden. You are not a complication. You are not a cost that doesn't pencil out. You are a person, whole and worth the full fight. Don't let anyone, not even the person who was supposed to love you first and best, put a DNR on your life. Fight for yourself the way Priya fought for me, and then build the life that was waiting on the other side. It is bigger and more beautiful than anything they told you you deserved. I promise you that. Thank you so much for watching. If this story reached somewhere real in you, please hit that like button right now. Every like tells YouTube to put this story in front of someone who needs to hear it. That's how we reach the women sitting alone in hospital rooms, the overlooked daughters, the women who were told to take up less space. Share this video with one person today, just one. You never know who needed this exact story on this exact day. Subscribe to Soulful Drama Stories and turn on notifications. We are here every single day with stories that matter, stories that see you. Drop a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me about the moment someone tried to erase you and what you did next. I read every comment, every one. This community is real and it is here. Remember this before you close this video. The family that was supposed to choose you sometimes won't, but you can choose yourself. You can build the life. You can open the door. And once you do, you will never need their permission again. This is Soulful Drama Stories. We'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself. You matter.